A lot of energy. That's great.
And I don't even drink coffee. I don't need a.
Yeah. We're going to do a joint presentation tonight, John Light and I, and I'm going to just give you a brief, probably 5-minute overview of Citizens Climate Lobby, and then John will speak to you more specifically about the business benefits of the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. My name is Tom Osborne. I'm a retired history professor and at Santa Ana College, and one of the classes I taught was world history. And you can be certain that I taught my students about the history of Cyrus the Great. In Persian history, he's a person whom I greatly admire. And I remember that in my lectures in the classroom, that his domain, which was quite extensive, running all the way from the Indus River far westward, was particularly known for a measure of religious and cultural toleration that was virtually unmatched in the ancient world. And I mentioned that knowing about your Persian background, and also to share with you that those values of ethnic and cultural religious diversity are shared. They're part of our DNA in Citizens Climate Lobby. I'm speaking to you tonight for a variety of reasons, but probably the most important are our grandchildren. That is, my grandchildren and your grandchildren. I want to be sure that they inherit a livable planet. And to make sure that that happens, we have to address the existential crisis of our time, which is climate change. To address that crisis, Citizens Climate Lobby was founded in 2007 in Coronado, California. So it started here in Southern California, spread throughout the state, and then throughout the nation, and then beyond our shores. And what I would say in general about Citizens Climate Lobby is it's a nonprofit, nonpartisan, business-friendly advocacy network. Now, I know that your organization is a network as well. So we probably use a lot of the same processes and approaches. And what we work toward in our networking in Citizens Climate Lobby is to build the political will to pass a measure in Congress, the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. Well, in the 14 years that have elapsed since the founding of CCL, our organization, as I suggested just a moment ago, has become international. We are on every inhabited continent. We have 606 chapters throughout the world, and we have nearly 200,000 volunteers who are doing what John and I are doing tonight, and what Melissa, John's wife, does as she works with our local chapter, of which Shawnee is a member. So it's what are the other groups of Citizens Climate Lobby do in other parts of the world? They're working for passage of legislation that will put a price on carbon. We call it a carbon fee and dividend measure, and I'm sure John will explain what that means in a few minutes. But they're working on measures that are very similar to the ones that we work on. And when I say we work on these in the United States, it means that we lobby government officials at all levels, from city council to Capitol Hill. My wife and I and many others in Orange County have traveled to Washington, D.C. back in the pre-COVID era, going back about 3 years. We went to a lobby day in Washington, D.C., where some 1,200 of us descended upon Congress in one day. And we hit all but about 7 or 8 members of the House and the Senate. We had our appointments that had been set up, and we lobbied with members of Congress and or their staffs. So that's the kind of activity that we're engaged in. We're particularly focused right now on passage of this measure, the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, well, for 2 reasons. First of all, there's something that's pushing us, and that is the destructive, life-threatening, extreme climatic conditions that we've experienced recently. Just think back in California's wildfires, going back to the Camp Fire, November 2018. My wife and I were up in the Bay Area visiting our kids and our grandchildren who live about 200 miles from Paradise, California, that was incinerated. And the smoke, the pall over the whole Bay Area was so bad that we were housebound for 5 days with our kids, our in-laws, and our 2 very young grandchildren. So we've got that pushing us, and you can recall the recent wildfires that we've had right here in Orange County. But pulling us is a vision, especially right now, an opportunity, because we have a new administration in Congress and in the White House that, especially in the White House, that is climate informed. We have a real chance now to pass this measure. And I think that 2021 could be the year to pass what I think would be a transformative approach to addressing climate. Now, my friend and co-worker, John Light, is a retired businessman, as some of you probably know. And he's going to speak to you now about how the Carbon Dividend Act is good for the planet and good for your businesses at the same time. And John's going to show you that your mission, and this is taken from your webpage, to quote, advance business education, promote economic growth, elevate community outreach, inspire and connect the best of cultures towards a better community for all. That's at the heart of Citizen Climate Lobby's mission as well. Well, John?
Okay, so as Tom said, I have a business background. I spent almost 40 years in the banking business. I retired from BNP Paribas, one of the world's largest banks. I was an executive committee member and a managing director in charge of Treasury ALM, which meant that I managed the bank's balance sheet, the interest rate risk, liquidity risk, and made sure there was enough funding in it. So using that business experience, trying to understand about different congressional legislation, I'm going to focus in on the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. Keep in mind that I had in mind, I should say, before I retired, I want to do something for the environment. And meeting Tom, his wife Ginger, and the Citizens Climate Lobby, I realized that the best thing I could do to help the environment, to save the environment, was to find a way to help reduce carbon emissions. And that's what this is all about. This is what our advocating is all about. I'm going to quote 2 economists of diverging views. Milton Friedman, a very conservative economist, was all for free markets. That was his big thing. But he wanted a free market that was free and fair. He didn't want to subsidize anything in costs when you talk about a free market. And he would say that the cost of pollution for our society should be borne by the polluter and not society as a whole. Janet Yellen, a past Fed chair, our current US Secretary of Treasury, she would say and has said that a carbon tax and dividend program is a textbook solution to reducing carbon emissions. Now I'm going to get into the presentation and tell you why we think it's not a tax but a fee, and why it seems to be the best plan. And the best plan, as Tom would state, is what does the best for society at the least cost. So what is the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act? And besides a mouthful, I'll say EICDA. It's a bill that was in the last congressional session. It will be in the next congressional session very shortly, we hope and we expect. It's a bill that introduces a carbon fee. It returns a monthly revenue to all legal residents. It has a border adjustment attached to it, and it has a regulatory pause attached to it. If I look at a schematic of this, I think it's easier to see it this way. A fee is charged for fossil fuels at the source. That fee is collected by the US Treasury. US Treasury returns everything back to US legal residents, minus the amount that it costs to distribute and collect, but that's very minor, and we'll see that later. The rest of the act, the carbon border adjustment, and the regulatory pause. So how does it work? Well, the fee, let's start there. The fee starts out low and then increases at a small pace or a slow pace for the ease of transition for both consumers and businesses to adjust. So the fee starts at $15 a metric ton of CO2 output, and then raises $10 for every metric ton of carbon emissions each year going forward. So it's a steady pace going up. Again, the steady pace in our mind makes this better for businesses to transition and understand what the cost is going to be to the balance sheet, and for consumers to be able to consume. But the good news on the consumer side is there's actually a dividend that they'll get, monthly payments equal to everybody. Whether you make $10,000 a year or $10 million a year, you're getting the same monthly dividend check. Again, it has a border adjustment. The border adjustment makes it so no domestic business is disadvantaged around the globe. If we were to export fossil fuels to a country that does not have a border adjustment or a price on their carbon, the fee is returned. It's rebated. That way, our US companies are on equal footing with our global partners or competitors. If a foreign country is bringing stuff, exporting to us, so we're importing goods, a carbon border adjustment will be put on that if that country didn't have one. Now, it's important to understand other countries around the world are doing dividend acts and carbon adjustments like we are. Europe just put one in, a border adjustment that will take effect in 2023. What that essentially means is we export fossil fuels to Europe. If we don't have a border adjustment, we're going to have to pay Europe's border adjustment. The way I look at this from my seat, we can either send the money to Europe and they can do what they want with it, or we can put something in like the EICDA, put in our carbon border adjustment, collect the money here in the US and pay it out to our own citizens. So either we can keep the money and use it for our revenue, or we can pass it along to Europe. From a regulatory standpoint, there's going to be a 10-year pause on some regulations or EPA standards. Economists believe that this plan will actually reduce carbon emissions faster than the current regulations in place So they believe pausing the regulations won't do anything negative. But if it does, it's limited. And after 10 years, the pause would be lifted, or we could adjust throughout if there's a need. So what will this act do? Now let's talk about it. It's effective. It should reduce carbon emissions quite a bit over the next decade. And that's important because scientists believe if we don't reduce by 50% over the next decade, we could be in trouble. So this is a good starting point for us. It will create jobs, and it will create local jobs. It's good for people because there's less pollution, which means it's better for our health. It's got bipartisan support, and it's revenue neutral, which is why I say it's not a tax. It means that all the money collected is going back right out to the citizens. It's not being saved by the government to spend on any other governmental priority. There are other dividend acts there. There are other carbon emission reduction acts in Congress today and last session. Some of them go at a faster rate because they want to reduce the emissions faster, but we think that's too fast and too much of a shock to the system and won't allow the smooth, easy transition for both the business side and the consumer side. Some of them are not revenue neutral. They actually pull aside some of the money collected for other priorities. The bill we're advocating brings it all back to everybody, and therefore it does not grow the government. Now, we're not the only ones advocating something like this. 4 previous Fed chairs and over 3,000 economists back in January of 2019 made a statement together saying that a carbon tax and a carbon combined with a carbon dividend is the proper way to approach this. Again, we believe that if we return all the money, there's really no tax. It's just a fee that's redistributed. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce supports this approach, and in fact, last month came out with this statement. So, as Tom says, we believe we have a climate-friendly political environment in both the executive branch and in Congress. From a business point of view, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce believes this is a correct approach. So I believe it's likely something will happen. Something will happen shortly. The question is what type of legislation will come through. And obviously we advocate this approach. It's a free market approach. So what will it do? Well, if we reduce carbon emissions by 40% over the next 12 years, we will essentially help prevent that 2 degrees Celsius increase that scientists are talking about. As I said, the scientists believe we need to cut 50% over the next decade, not to be thrown into over the threshold. So this gets us a good way there. However, it also has a lot of health benefits. 18% of premature deaths, according to Harvard University, is caused by air pollution. So by reducing carbon emissions, we can save 90,000 premature deaths. We'll save a bunch of hospitalizations a year. And for you, from the business side, less days of work that your staff is missing. It's projected 6 million person days a year we save. When you combine just those 3 things, that's a whopping $700 billion a year we can spend back in our economy, and not just for those health reasons. Tom talked about wildfires here in California and the West Coast. When you think of the mega storms we've had, whether it's floods, whether it's the cold snap in Texas, hurricanes on the East Coast, there is a lot of cleanup after all that. If we spent the money beforehand and not afterhand, it would be to better use. The mega storms are believed to cause between $100 and $300 billion a year. So between the two, that's $1 trillion a year back into our economy. And in fact, I'll argue, reading some recent data that we're already above the 300 billion a year with all the recent damage we've had. So where do we go from here? Well, from a standpoint, from your standpoint, this act will bring you better predictability and will bring you jobs. Projected to do over 2 million jobs at higher wages, at a faster growth with good retirement benefits. And they're local jobs. Now that's the growth side of your balance sheet. If you think about the cost side of your balance sheet, there will be a price increase. But what I'll tell you is all small businesses will have an equal playing field with prices rising to everybody. The way I'll describe this is everything, the fees are collected at the mine, well, or port. So let's use Chevron or Texaco as an example. They'll be charged when they create the oil reserves, the oil that they're gonna, and gas that they're gonna sell. That means the transportation cost of bringing goods to your businesses will go up because the idea is Texaco or Chevron, we assume will raise their prices because of the higher fees charged to them. That means the transportation, they're gonna charge the transportation companies. Those companies are gonna charge you to bring goods to your place. Your business is gonna have heat, and that heat's gonna be more expensive. So now you have some choices to make. Either raise your prices or cut your margins. If you raise your prices, not a problem, because there'll be dividends that the consumers are getting. There'll be enough dividends for the consumers to continue the usual purchasing patterns. Now I say that's important here because other bills which raise the price faster may not give the good ease of transition. And that's again why we're advocating for this bill. So you can plan your expense side. You know roughly how much is going up each year. So you have predictable increases. And if perchance you can go green faster, you're ahead of the curve. At some point, we're going to be a greener, if not full green, a greener economy. The greener you get, the less fees are there, which means you have more room for your margins. Now, why do I say there'll be plenty of purchasing power for your consumers? I want to show you this chart. This breaks up consumers by quintiles of earnings. If you look at the first quintile, the lowest quintile, there's $514 after tax of dividends received annually, with a projected cost of $273 in higher expenses between heat, transportation, everything else. So those consumers will have almost twice the money coming in as they would be spending extra. You can see the bottom 60% are ahead of the game. I believe that the lower wage earners spend more money in the local communities. It goes right back into local communities. So here I believe small businesses will do fine with this act at the rate that we're recommending the increases. If you go across demographics, it looks to me that over any demographic, it seems to be fairly treated. If I look at the cash flow, the carbon fee collected, which will be then brought out in dividends, is in green. The administrative cost is the same every year, and it's a very tiny slice. It may even be less now that our US Treasury is used to sending even COVID checks out, the COVID relief funds, as well as Social Security checks every month. So the setup is already there. What this chart is saying is the first year, and this chart's a year old, the first year, the fees collected are low and they start increasing with each year. And I'm going to show you another chart, same pattern, but to give you a real flavor in real dollars for a family of 4, 2 adults and 2 children. The first year this is enacted, there'd be $792 worth of annual dividends. It rises up to a peak 10 years from the start to $4,410. annually and then drops back down. It goes up because the fee increases every year and innovation hasn't really started nor reduction. At some point, and we believe after 10 years, the price is high enough. And that's again what I was saying before. Some plans, some other carbon emission reduction plans in Congress want to start off right away at the level we think it should take 10 years to get there. But we think, again, too big a shock to the system. But 10 years from now, when price is that high, there should be enough innovation created, enough renewables being used because they're cheaper, that all of a sudden carbon emissions is reduced, and then less fees are needed to be collected, and therefore less fees will be distributed. And over time, this whole act won't even be necessary because we'll be on a greener, renewable economy. We think that the free market approach is better than regulations. Regulations have some downsides. They're a little less efficient. They're a little slower to move forward. They don't last necessarily as long, and we question the fairness on a progressive point of view. Give you some reference information. Citizens Climate Lobby nationally is what I have on the first two lines in black. If you have any questions or thoughts, you can go onto their website. In green is locally. And then some other references, not CCL, although we will certainly look at them because they're very reputable sources. There are some references for you there. I'm going to wrap this up and then we'll be ready for questions and answers. But I'd like to give you a quote that I read not too long ago that has stuck with me. And it says, a predictable increase in carbon price will stimulate invention and investment in the new clean energy economy while ensuring that every American has the means to weather the transition and participate in putting solutions to work. And with that, Tom and I thank you for your time, and I think we're ready for questions. I'm going to stop.
Thank you, John. Thank you so much, both of you. I do have a question already in our chat box, and I'm going to read that while everybody else gets ready to ask their questions. Sharon is asking, are there any examples of revenue neutral carbon tax already in place anywhere in the world? How have they fared?
Tom, do you want to answer that?
If I leave out something that occurs to you, then just chime in. British Columbia has, and it's working very well. And now the entire nation of Canada is moving quickly in this direction.
Yeah. And I'll just add this example I would have given. They actually have had more positive results than they had predicted at the start.
Great. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Just raise your hand and we'll go to you. Nope, this is a quiet audience.
Daniel, have a question?
Yes.
Yes, can I have the very last page where you have put the sites? I just want to take a photo.
Absolutely. I just need to get my screen share back. Sorry about that. Took me a second. So you want the page before this, correct?
Right, correct.
So, oops.
All right, thank you.
Oh, you're quite welcome.
And we would just add those references that were at the bottom. Yale Climate Communications, for example, and the UCLA site and the NASA site. You can go on those sites free. Yale, I'm on the Yale site every day. You can sign up for it. It's free, and you get the most reliable information. I mean, it has instant credibility, all scientifically vetted.
Okay, great. If you don't have any other questions, or if you, John and Tom, if you just want to hang in there and stay with us, we'll just do an introduction of whoever wants to introduce what they have to say. I see. Ted, do you want to do a real quick introduction? Now we have more people. Ted, you need to unmute yourself. Ted is with the Orange County Transit Authority, OCTA.
Oh, Shawnee,
Yeah, I think that after a year of doing this, I would figure out the mute unmute. But yeah, I'm so grateful to be here, and I'm with the Orange County Transportation Authority. I'm Ted Nguyen, and I am the Senior Manager in External Affairs, and my job is to help engage with the community, with different stakeholders on how we can do things better, faster, more efficient. With your input, we run a robust bus system along with a metro train system, Amtrak, as well as construction of the largest freeway improvement project in California. That's the 405 improvement project, where we're building 2 lanes in each direction. And then we're also making improvements in South Orange County with the I-5 project, along with building the streetcar from Santa Ana to Garden Grove. And then we also have an environmental mitigation of property that we keep as open land to preserve a legacy for Orange County. And we have some beautiful open space that is preserved, and I want to say forever. Hopefully it is forever. And yeah, we're just doing a lot on the environmental front and just learning how to do things a little bit better. And so what you see behind me is just a way that I've been utilizing just to be able to you know, keep eyeball on what we're doing, and just to create a little bit more interest, because I know that we've all zoomed out. And so this is just a good way of providing information in a visual setting. So it's great to be here. And if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. Thank you.
Shawnee, there's two.
Awesome, thank you.
There's 2 questions in the chat. Do you want me to answer those?
Yes.
You want to wait till later?
No, go ahead. If you see them, some of them are directed to me. So if you see them, go ahead and answer. I see Sudi had asked a question. So why don't you go ahead and answer Sudi's question? Then I have Shireen and Safa also asking questions. So go ahead.
So Sudi asked, how can we help this cause? And there's several ways, and I'm sure Tom can add on to what I'm going to say. But one of them is just to, if you agree with this type of cause and advocacy, you can call your congressperson, you can call your senators, you can write letters to the editor, you can join CCL. We always want new members. We have a local chapter. We meet once a month, and then we talk about what we can do. You can put it on social media. You get the word out. The idea for us is we're trying to build a political will to allow our Congress people to actually put this act in place. And we're hoping whatever happens this year with the carbon emission reduction legislation, that it will look as close as possible to what we believe is the best plan out there.
I would just add to that that we have our local chapter of Citizens Climate Lobby. We call it the Laguna chapter, but it's beyond Laguna. It also includes Laguna Niguel and Aliso Viejo. And there are other chapters of CCL throughout Orange County, and all members of Congress, with the one exception of Michelle Steele, are co-sponsors of this measure that we're advocating for, the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. So if you're interested in joining us, like John said, we meet once a month on Saturday mornings from 10 a.m. to noon, and we'd love to have you come to our meeting. And we also have introductory sessions that you can go into and learn more about CCL before even coming to our monthly meeting. And maybe we could give our contact information to Shawnee after this meeting.
It's also in the chat, Tom.
Sure.
Oh, good, great, okay.
So Shireen has said, I missed the first couple of minutes. Is this being adopted in China, or are there more carbon users?
China does not have they have a price on carbon, as I understand it, but it's not carbon fee and dividend. It is more along the lines of cap and trade, which is what we have here in California and in a few other states. China is moving in the direction of having a more effective price on carbon, and I think they'll get there, but they're not there yet. the U.S. could set an example that would encourage them, though.
Okay. Safa has asked, how is the increase in cost of fuel tax regulated?
So I was typing into the chat, but I can answer part of that. When you look at how it's going to be regulated, they're going to have to charge the producers. They're going to charge the producers at their source. And if you give me 1 second, I have projected how that fee is going to be sent out. So for the coal supply, they'll essentially weigh the feeders that are essentially between the mine and the plant. So as the coal goes across the feeders, that's where they'll assess that price. When you look at gas supply, there is something called a metering skid. I'm not familiar with it, but it's how they measure natural gas. And oil, there's something called an LACT meter. Again, I'm not familiar with that, but as the oil comes through those feeders, that's how they measure it.
Okay. And then Nima with lavoshak.com is asking, what will be first carbon neutral country or city?
What will be the first carbon neutral?
Yeah, that's the question. What will be the first carbon neutral country and then city?
Oh, I don't know in the U.S. or in the world, or it's.
Well, let's go with U.S. Let's see, what city, do we have any statistics on how everybody's doing, what different states are doing, or what different, is there any particular city? Is Laguna Beach going to be the first one?
If we have anything to say about it.
With your leadership.
Yeah. California is aiming for that kind of carbon neutrality in 2045. No state is there yet. No nation is there yet. And as we speak, the nations of Europe are moving very fast on this, and they're aiming for carbon neutrality before 2045. But they're looking at 2035. The trading bloc in Europe.
Okay, great. Do we have any other questions? Thank you everyone for putting your questions on our chat. If you have any other questions, either type it or raise your hand. Jonathan has left some information for us on the chat. If you want to copy that, go ahead. No hands are being raised.
Shani, I've got a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, hi
go
there.
ahead.
Yeah, my question is, are you seeing anything from public polling that's showing Southern Californians, especially Orange County, as far as moving in the right direction when it comes to climate change? And what are some of the things that we can do to help move the needle with our neighbors and our colleagues and our friends?
We are seeing positive things. We've seen Laguna Beach City Council, Costa Mesa City Council, Santa Ana City Council all endorse this. We will look for other city councils to do that as well. If we get each city to say they want it, it's much easier for our congressional representative to say they want it as well. Tom, you were going to say something? I might have cut you off. I'm sorry.
You didn't. No, I think that's good, just because what you said shows that there's movement, certainly in Orange County and in other parts of Southern California. You can get really good polling information on this carbon fee and dividend approach, again from Yale Climate Communications. And I would say this much, I don't remember what the exact figures are, but the polling is that a majority of the American public that's been polled on this are in favor of putting a price on carbon, like our carbon fee and dividend measure. So the problem isn't so much with the public as it has been with members of Congress, many of whom are responsive to the fossil fuel industry. But I would say right now that this approach is winning with the public, and we've made considerable inroads into Congress already.
Awesome. Majid, do you have a question? If you do, unmute yourself, please.
Sure. I was just wondering if this approach at the state level can create any form of a competition within the nation, as opposed to just go with nation to nation. So does it make any sense if California steps forward and do something? Is there any mechanism to support that?
There is no legislation calling for California to take this action by itself. The measure that we've talked about, the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, is nationwide and has to be approved by Congress. And I think that's the way we want to stick with national legislation. I think we need uniformity in addressing this global problem. I don't think we can do it state by state. But if we build a public will within each state, that will express itself in the halls of Congress.
I think what Tom is saying is absolutely correct, because the only way for the mechanism to work simply would be for the U.S. Treasury, which already has the setup to send out monthly checks to everybody. You need it nationally. I also don't think you can have one state be carbon neutral and another state not. It doesn't work as easily that way. But Tom's right. If we build the will, and I think you're seeing California start to lead. We're talking about the EV cars that we're going to require. We're talking a lot of things that will change. That type of will brings it across the finish line. And I think we're very close this year, finally, to having something be adopted. I'd be surprised if we don't get something up in debate in Congress, a real debate.
I think we should